a powerful CEO, admired by millions and feared by rivals, thought he had seen everything life could throw at him. But one evening, as he slid into the back seat of his luxury car, he was blindsided by something completely unexpected. From the shadows of the seat, a small black girl looked him straight in the eyes and told him to shut up. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disrespect. It was something far deeper, something that would shatter his ego, expose hidden truths, and change the course of his life forever. Viewers had no idea what was coming next. The man at the center of this story was Richard Hale, a self-made millionaire CEO whose empire stretched across finance, real estate, and technology. In the business world, he was known as unstoppable, a man who silenced boardrooms with a single look, closed billion-dollar deals with ease, and built a reputation on power, precision, and control. His wealth and influence gave him access to a life few could imagine: luxury penthouses, chauffeur-driven cars, and a calendar filled with galas and private meetings with world leaders. But despite his towering success, Richard lived in a world detached from the everyday struggles of ordinary people. He believed in hard work, yes, but also believed that those who failed to rise simply hadn't tried hard enough. This mindset, cold and unyielding, often kept him blind to the harsher realities faced by others, especially those outside his privileged circle. On one seemingly ordinary evening, Richard left a high-profile charity event, a glittering affair where guests sipped champagne beneath chandeliers while pledging generous donations. Tired but satisfied, he slipped into the back seat of his luxury car, expecting the usual peace of silence. The tinted windows shut out the city's noise, and the leather seats carried the comforting scent of wealth and power. But then, in the quiet he so cherished, something disrupted his carefully ordered world. A sound, a voice, soft, small, but firm. From beside him, a young black girl no older than 8 sat curled up in the corner of his car. And with a calm boldness that no child should have possessed, she looked him directly in the eye and told him to shut up. Richard froze, stunned by what he had just heard. Never in his life had anyone, let alone a child, spoken to him in such a way. For a moment he thought he was imagining it, but the girl's piercing eyes made it clear. She meant every word. There was no fear in her voice, no hesitation, only a strange authority that silenced even him, the man used to commanding the world. Questions raced through his mind. Who was she? How did she get in my car? He glanced at his driver, but the man looked just as bewildered. The girl shifted in her seat, hugging a small, tattered backpack against her chest. Her clothes were worn, her shoes scuffed, and her hair slightly messy, as if she had been running or hiding. She didn't belong to the sparkling world Richard inhabited, and yet here she was, invading his space with a presence too powerful to ignore. Richard's instinct was anger. No one interrupted his order, his silence, his world. Yet something in the girl's expression stopped him from speaking. Her eyes weren't just defiant. They were tired, heavy with a story far bigger than her years. She wasn't being disrespectful, for the sake of it. She was defending herself, protecting something he couldn't yet see. As the car moved through the city, Richard noticed how she flinched every time they passed flashing lights or raised voices on the street. It was as if she had lived through things no child should endure. And then, through the silence, fragments of her life began to piece themselves together in Richard's mind. The backpack filled with crumbs of food, the bruises on her small arms, the way she kept glancing at the locked doors as though escape was always her first instinct. Slowly, the anger inside him turned into something else: unease. Richard realized this wasn't just some bold child who wandered into his life for amusement. This girl carried a truth, a weight, a reason for being there that would shake the foundation of everything he believed about power, wealth, and humanity. For the first time in years, Richard felt powerless, not because of his enemies in business, not because of economic uncertainty, but because of a child who had nothing yet spoke to him as if she held everything. And deep inside, he sensed that whatever words she would say next would unravel the man he thought he was. The car slowed to a stop at a red light, and in the quiet hum of the engine, Richard finally leaned forward, For the first time in years, his voice trembled. He demanded to know who the little girl was and why she had spoken to him like that. She turned to face him, her small frame straightening with a gravity far beyond her years. "I told you to shut up," she whispered, "because you're the reason my mommy cries." The words struck Richard like a blow to the chest. He blinked, unable to comprehend. But the girl's eyes burned with certainty. She pulled a crumpled photo from her backpack, a photo of her mother standing in front of one of Richard's company buildings. Suddenly, pieces fell into place. Richard's corporation had recently closed several factories, laying off hundreds of employees without warning. Families were left stranded, homes lost, lives shattered. Her mother had been one of them. Richard remembered the reports he had brushed aside, the complaints, the protests, the desperate pleas for help. In boardrooms high above the city, those cries had been nothing more than numbers on a paper, inconveniences to be silenced. But now, in the back seat of his own car, those numbers had a face. A child's face. The girl's voice didn't waver. She spoke of nights spent hungry, of moving from shelter to shelter, of watching her mother's spirit break under the weight of hopelessness. And then she said it again, louder this time. "You need to shut up, because you don't know what it's like to lose everything. You don't know what it's like to watch someone you love suffer." Every word cut deeper than the last. Richard sat frozen, his carefully built world collapsing around him. For once there was no contract to sign, no deal to make, no wealth to shield him. All that remained was the unshakable truth delivered by a child who should never have had to carry such pain. And in that moment the mighty CEO realized he was the villain in her story. The silence inside the car was unbearable. Richard's breath came heavy, his expensive watch ticking louder than it ever had before. For the first time in his career, power and wealth couldn't shield him. A little black girl had shattered the walls he built around himself with nothing but truth. He wanted to defend himself, to explain that decisions weren't personal, that it was just business. But the girl's steady gaze made every excuse wither before it reached his lips. Business decisions had destroyed her life, her family's dignity, and her innocence. As the driver continued down the road, Richard's reflection in the window no longer looked like that of a celebrated CEO. Instead, it was the image of a man who had turned away from humanity for the sake of profit. For the first time, he asked himself questions he had avoided for years. How many lives have I ruined? With the stroke of a pen? How many families have I left in despair while I celebrated quarterly gains? The little girl leaned her head against the seat, exhaustion evident on her young face. She had spoken her truth. Whether he listened or not was no longer her burden, it was his. When the car stopped outside his mansion, Richard stepped out slowly, but he didn't head for the front door. His eyes lingered on the child, realizing that her words were not just a confrontation, they were a plea to see beyond himself, beyond his wealth, and to recognize the humanity he had ignored. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. The girl's words echoed endlessly in his mind. "You need to shut up because you don't know what it's like to lose everything." He thought of his own daughter, safe in her room, never having to worry about hunger or homelessness. The contrast was unbearable. By morning, Richard knew his life could not continue as it had. He announced sweeping changes in his company, reopening job opportunities, creating funds for displaced families, and ensuring fair treatment for workers. To the public, it was hailed as a shocking transformation. But to Richard, it was more than corporate reform. It was redemption. Still, the memory of that night haunted him, because no matter how much he gave back, he could never undo the pain already inflicted. The story ends not with a man's triumph, but with a reminder. Wealth can build walls, but truth tears them down. And sometimes, the most powerful voices are the smallest ones, those society tries to silence. So ask yourself, if a child confronted you with the consequences of your choices, would you be able to bear it? Or would you, like Richard, finally realize the cost of ignoring the humanity in others?